So what we're going to do today is first, I'm going to tee the topic up with some of the things that we found as we looked into this emerging topic. We talked to different agencies. We did some web searches. We brought things together. We presented that through a white paper to the pooled fund study. And then from there, we developed a fact sheet and also this presentation. So in this presentation, I will be talking about the things that we learned from that research, and then there will be people who will talk about what they've done in their agencies that deal with the topic of how to deal with uh, adverse weather through things like uh, the variable speed limits, specifically the variable speed limits. So some of the things that we found that agencies face in terms of challenges include that there's very rapidly changing weather conditions that they need to respond to and react to. A lot of times drivers travel too fast for those conditions, and also those increased speeds and actually the speed differential from some travelers traveling too slowly to those traveling too fast increases the risk of crashes. So there's some operational strategies uh, that these agencies will share that will deal with how to address those changing weather and roadway conditions. Uh, VSL is a strategy to consider during adverse weather. I think it's been proven pretty effective in a lot of areas, especially in mountain passes, but not exclusively to mountain passes. And it's also important to think about how VSL can be implemented and then operated in these changing conditions. And specifically, that usually includes integrating that into your traffic management system. Next slide, please. So variable speed limits, or sometimes variable or dynamic speed advisories, but mostly for weather, it's variable speed limits, help to manage traffic, to slow traffic down, to improve safety and reliability when there's adverse weather. Agencies will alert drivers of what the conditions are and then encourage them to slow down by posting a lower speed limit and then also displaying the conditions that they're about to experience on changeable message signs. Agencies will also share information through a lot of different notifications, through traveler information websites, on social media, a variety of ways that they can share that information to drivers and to the media and others who are interested. And they also will inform some of the other public agencies like state police or state patrol, maintenance teams, emergency responders, all of the people who may need to deal with traffic in adverse weather conditions. Next slide, please. Some of the benefits that we've seen from variable speed limit in areas with adverse weather. First, to improve safety and reduce number of crashes. I think that's the number one benefit, and that's why we have it listed here. It's primarily a safety issue. It also helps to reduce crash-related road closures, so it helps with maintenance overall and reducing the load on maintenance workers and maintenance funds. Um, Also, it increases driver awareness on why travel speeds are being adjusted and the importance of slowing down in these conditions. And then also, we've seen some of these positive before and after results. For example, Ohio DOT showed that they reduced crashes during snow events by 35%. Ryan will talk more about that later. Also, decreased injuries and fatalities from 20 to 9 crashes per year. So that's a pretty substantial reduction in fatalities. Wisconsin DOT also found that they reduced average vehicle speed by 13%, and Utah DOT found that they improved speed limit compliance and significantly reduced crashes as well. Next slide. So what people want to do reflect a lot of those benefits. Generally, the desired outcomes of using VSLs during adverse weather is to improve safety, to improve travel time reliability, to reduce vehicle speeds and speed variations, and to improve driver awareness of the adjusted speed limit and also compliance with it. A lot of studies have shown that if people understand why they've been asked to slow down, they're more likely to slow down. So I think that's one of the most important things. Also, want to be able to manage that variable speed limit based on changing circumstances. So it needs to be somewhat dynamic, so those speeds can be changed based on the changing roadway and weather conditions. Also, then another desired outcome is to share information and coordinate with emergency responders and service providers. Next slide, please. So some of the things that agencies consider when they're thinking about using variable speed limits during adverse weather conditions is first around enforcement. And should there be regulatory or advisory speeds displayed? I think very often with adverse weather, the regulatory might be more important. That's a personal view of mine. I think it has a bigger impact. Also need to think about effective sign locations. Where should the signs be? And that will depend on what the kind of normal weather conditions are and how far in advance speeds can be reduced and reduced effectively. Also, what other operational strategies should be incorporated in this overall traffic management during adverse weather? And it's important to realize that the benefits can vary quite a bit from site to site, and there's a lot of uncontrolled factors, and some of those are, the mix of the motorists. How aware are they of the events that are going to result in variable speed limits? Certainly, people who are new to that area, aren't experienced driving over that stretch of roadway at that time, they may be less aware, and that can affect how beneficial it will be. That also leads to speed limit compliance rate. People who understand it more are more likely to reduce speeds. Also, this all leads to driver behavior too. The more people who are unaware of the results are probably, or of the events, are probably less likely to have had that behavior people are looking for. However, keep in mind that there's a broad array of drivers anyway, and some of them are going to be less likely to comply just by their nature. And finally, road geometry will also have an impact on benefits. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges then with implementing variable speed limits, and because they vary from site to site, that's kind of a challenge when you're trying to say what the kind of benefits are. And some places they may be lower, some places higher. These variation in benefits we covered on the last slide, but just be aware that there's some challenges with that, as as one location opens after another, there may be some that have better benefits than the other. And sometimes people can question why, if there's a drop from one location to another, why did you choose that? Those sorts of things. Um, and then typically the compliance is lower if the speed limits aren't enforceable. Uh, Finally, another challenge is that youth across the state or region may benefit from things like knowing when and how to change speeds. So that means there's a challenge in getting that information out to the driving public and then conveying the relevant information so that they understand why variable speed limits are used and how. And finally, sometimes there's challenges with applying policies and procedures consistently across a region or across a state. Next slide, please. So some of the support for using and managing VSLs include the traffic management systems need the capabilities and the resources to support actively managing those variable speed limits. That's one of the most important things about dynamically managing variable speeds, is to have a, a central place that it can be controlled from, a traffic management system that can do that. And those traffic management systems need to be able to collect and process data. They need to disseminate information to travelers, emergency responders, other people who need to know about the conditions. And then the TMSs need to continue to monitor how weather is affecting traffic. Next slide, please. So some of the issues to consider when thinking about incorporating variable speed limits into your traffic management system include thinking through the operational requirements of the traffic management system. And really those requirements are pretty similar to a lot of other traffic management system strategies. Uh, there's also probably some need to establish formal operating procedures for when the variable speed limits are operational, and how to support those and how to operate the system. The traffic management systems may also need to automate the operation of VSL, depending on what the conditions are and how quickly they change. Uh, but at the same time, an operator needs to be in the loop so that they can monitor what's happening with the system, make sure that it's reacting correctly, and make changes if it's needed based on experience and the different conditions that are going on. And then the TMS needs to be able to communicate with responders and other agencies. Next slide, please. So there's also I think the benefit of having the variable speed limits with changeable message signs. We've mentioned that throughout here. That's a way that we can get information to the driving public. They're important for traffic control purposes. The messages need to be easy to understand, just like any other any other changeable message sign. And there's a bunch of documents that can help to show how to effectively use CMSs. Next slide, please. So here's some considerations. I'm just going to point out a few. It's really important to know what your staffing needs are going to be, and that includes number of staff and also how to train them. It's really important to think about, is this going to be a regional or a statewide implementation? Finally, to look at reviewing the processes and procedures that are needed as well, and to evaluate the availability of the devices to provide travel condition information. Next slide, please. Uh, so I'm just going to show a few slides on some of the things that occur, uh, and typically a scenario for changing speeds might be that there's some information about expected snowfall. The operator decides to change the speed limit, or the system sees that there's some changes. Uh, there are other things that may occur. Visibility declines, grip factor might decline, and then based on those changing conditions, the operator looks at adjusting the speed limit. Next slide, please. Uh, Ryan's going to talk more about Ohio DOT, but they looked at staffing and training needs, uh, and he'll be talking about that. Oregon DOT integrated their speed data and closed circuit TV into their TMS to help with the variable speed limits and with the changeable message signs, and then a lot of the DOTs have deployed VSLs along routes with history of crashes, uh, and and Ryan will talk a little bit more about Pennsylvania's experience. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned include it's important to integrate VSL into TMS. The implementation of VSL does not always require new positions or additional training of staff. It kind of depends uh, what staff there is and what their experience has been. Um, but it's important to note that the requirements for the operators are similar to other TMS operational strategies. And again, the use of variable speed limits are most effective in conjunction with changeable message signs. Next slide, please. So some of the future direction includes collecting data, being able to show those benefits, and then also I think it's important to look at how one corridor or one segment of VSL can lead to increased use in other corridors as well. Next slide, please. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to Tomas.